Back in March, the Power Rangers movie by Lionsgate celebrated its 5th birthday. I saw the 2017 film on a trip to Kansas City, Missouri. I was there with my college friends for a March Madness basketball tournament. I was in my college's pep band group, and look at my face getting covered up by a Wendy's ad on national television. During our time off on one of these days, the Power Rangers movie came out. Now, my friends didn't want to see it, so I went alone. I walked the streets of Kansas City, an 18-year-old college freshman, literally about to turn 19 the next day. My birthday happened to be that day. I went and saw the movie at the now-closed Cinemark Palace, the Plaza Theater. Sitting alone in the theater, I thought, wow, I'm a grown-up. I had seen movies since I turned 18, but this was the first film I saw by myself because I loved what it was about and I didn't care what other people thought. Not to mention, at the time I was traveling all over the country and getting to have these experiences with my friends from college, it was my first feeling of alone time. After I watched the movie and started walking back to my hotel, it dawned on me how much my perspective had changed between being a kid and an adult. I grew into an adult alongside Power Rangers. Since then, I've had episodes of deep thought. What makes a good Power Rangers film? Having it in my life for so long and into adulthood, I felt like I had a good grasp on what that would take. And it looks like today, I'm finally going to explore that. First off, let's cover all 3 of the franchise's attempts at a theatrical production. All 3 films have some strengths in their own rights, but in my opinion, I don't think any of them are the Power Rangers movie. Let's start off with 1995's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. The series' first run on the silver screen was a financial success. At the time, the show's popularity was skyrocketing, and the creators took their chance to make bank at the box office. The movie itself takes place during the back half of the end of the show's 2nd season, but would actually be deemed non-canon by the show's 3rd season by retconning the ninja powers they gained in the film with a different storyline. They kept the plot simple and followed the Rangers as they went through the trope of going on a journey to obtain a great power to fight the new villain, Ivan Ooze. It's a fun film, but in the storytelling department, it's the weakest. None of the Rangers themselves, or really any of the characters, get any worthwhile development. You see them make their way to the great power and have to fight obstacles along their way. The Rangers don't really learn anything, they just get their powers and dip out. The film itself also made the decision to redesign the suits with a more armored appearance. These were notoriously very cumbersome to wear, and the actors complained of back problems. I personally never really liked the suits. In the show, they wear the famous spandex.
That is not spandex!
They wear the skin-tight outfits, and they work. You don't need anything fancy, and I think the movie would have been fine with the ones from the show. I think armor actually ruins the silhouette the Rangers had. Power Rangers always felt believable to me, as the heroes weren't bulked up like comic book superheroes were, despite what the toys would have you believe. Finally, the designs don't feel like an upgrade to the original suits, they feel more like cheap knockoffs, especially the helmets. I do, however, love Ivan Ooze as a villain, and some of the lines were just too iconic.
Woo! Where's my autograph book? Ha! Power Rangers, huh?
But also, you can tell it's their first film with some semblance of a budget. I've always thought the ninja suits were lame, them spending money on huge set pieces instead of investing time into characters. Finally, the awful CG Megazord fight, ugh. Even as a kid, I thought it could have been better. Just 2 years later, Power Rangers would give the feature-length world another shot. This movie would be a bit more divisive. While the first film felt like Power Rangers with more budget, the second film instead feels like a Power Rangers episode, but much longer. Despite being a year out from the Mighty Morphin days, Turbo was still touted as a sequel to the previous film.
So good, in fact, let's compare these moves to the real Rangers in their new film Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, aka Power Rangers the sequel.
Don't forget, the first film isn't canon to the show, but confusingly enough, the second one is canon. The movie takes place immediately after Power Rangers Zeo and leads into the next season, Power Rangers Turbo. My too long didn't watch synopsis of the film is that a space pirate named Divatox comes to Earth, chasing down a sad-looking Mogwai who has the power to access an island where she can free the imprisoned Malagor and marry him. Oh yeah, and the Power Rangers are there. Yeah, really, they spend most of their time not using their powers until the final half hour of the film, so, yeah, they're just there. But despite all that, this one's my personal favorite. Unlike the franchise's other movie affairs, Turbo actually embraces the show's camp and doesn't try to hide it. In fact, they use the exact same suits as in the show. Mostly. They for some reason got rid of the yellow triangles on the shoulder that appear in the series, but it took me years to notice that. They also go the traditional route with the Megazord fight, with suits and miniatures. It just shows that Power Rangers doesn't need to do anything fancy for the theaters. What worked in the show worked well here. The only downside was that there weren't that many Power Rangers moments in this Power Rangers movie. Despite coming straight off the series, the Zeo powers make no appearance other than Cap morphing into Zeo Ranger 1 to survive a fall, only for it to be interrupted when she falls into the water mid-morph. I actually think this starts the trope of Power Rangers morphing to survive falls from great heights, so I guess it's world building. The writing itself is similar to Mighty Morphin in that the Rangers go on another journey. The only character with decent development is the infamous Justin, the Blue Ranger, who's a kid.
Good thing you don't need a license to drive a Zord. So, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's a thing. In all seriousness, I didn't mind him when I was younger, and I still don't mind him today. He's decently acted for a kid, but there's just a lot of emphasis put on him, and you just get that nagging feeling that he doesn't quite deserve the role. It is, however, sad that Zordon would stoop even lower than using teens to fight his wars. The kid's 13, Zordon, way to put him in harm's way. Diva Talks was brilliantly acted and was an entertaining part of the film in more ways than one. As campy as they are, Power Rangers really knows how to make fun villains. She was also genuinely effective, tricking the Rangers, sending them on a goose chase, attacking them when they start pursuing her, turning her friends against them. She's one of the more comedic villains, but damn, she's got a plan and she's effective.
I need your advice. How do I get rid of the Power Rangers?
What? The Power Rangers?
Last but not least is Power Rangers 2017. After 2 decades, the next attempt came and went. Power Rangers 2017 came somewhat out of left field. At the time, the franchise was in a weird spot. Despite being bought out back from Disney by the original owners, the show's overall quality was very poor, so when they announced a new film, I was excited but cautious. Over the months, they'd announced the cast, who looked great. I absolutely love and adore this cast. Side note, I worked at the Oregon State Fair the summer before the cast was announced, and I saw Becky G walk by and I had no clue who she was until my coworker told me. Months later, she got cast in the film. Anyway, they'd also reveal the suits, and oh boy, I did not like them. They were CG messes, and the design was all over the place. They obviously took inspiration from Marvel with hints of Iron Man, with all the layers and armor plating, but they also took cues from DC with a gross pattern all over their suits. Other than red and pink, you can barely tell that their helmets resemble dinosaurs. They don't even really keep the visor shapes of the originals. In fact, yellow and black just look like lazy recolors of blue and pink. I'll expand more on this later. The film itself is very clearly a retelling of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers story, separate to the show. Of all 3 films, it has the best storyline, actively using character motivations, flaws, and development to help further the plot. The Rangers, all strangers in this version of the story, discover an alien spacecraft where they're granted the power coins. The coins grant them enhanced strength. After training to become Rangers, with only Billy, the Blue Ranger, being the only one able to morph. But after Trini gets visited by Space Witch Rita Repulsa, the teens try to go after her, only for her to outpower them, killing Billy. Not destroying, killing. That was honestly the best part of the film. Despite coming into it knowing that this would be different from your typical Power Rangers fare, it's still a shock to see a Power Ranger get killed off, Kendrick's notwithstanding. Seeing a long, drawn-out sequence of the Rangers carrying Billy's body to Zordon's ship felt heavy. We never get to see scenes of levity, and Billy's death eventually pushes the Rangers to morph. Also, Billy gets revived thanks to the Morphin grid. Okay. They fight Rita, she creates Goldar, and the Rangers fight them in their CG Megazord. The Megazord being CG doesn't bug me as much as the 1995 film. Technology has gone so far by then, but the overall design is incredibly ugly and doesn't resemble the original at all. I remember the toy being bad. Megazords are fun because of how mechanical they can be and the clever engineering of the transformations, but the movie's toys show that it's just a parts former. The Zords don't form one cohesive design, and the Megazord just feels like a generic CG giant monster, not even a robot. The film itself is also known for its quite infamous product placement deal with Krispy Kreme.
Krispy Kreme. This is a special place.
Very special.
It must be.
Don't get me wrong, I love Krispy Kreme as much as the next guy, but this was a little too much. Overall, the film does a decent job as a superhero movie. However, it felt too generic, it didn't scream Power Rangers, and I feel that stems from how much they deviated from the source material. You can absolutely change, and it's inevitable that change will happen when going from the small screen to a bigger medium, but you can really replace the Rangers with anyone else, and it's the same film. Lastly, this film has some surprising names in its cast. They've got Bryan Cranston as Zord, his first role in the franchise since voicing a few monsters in the original series. Yes, Walter White voiced on Power Rangers back in the day. Then there's Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa, who is definitely threatening and campy.
You've got spunk, little yellow.
She was also the former Green Ranger, a tease we will never see the payoff for. Oh, and Bill Hader voices Alpha 5. That's neat.
All right, everybody, come on, let's go. McLovin!
The final bit that I'll talk about is the scalability of it. What do I mean by scalability? It's where they can go from here. The Marvel Universe since the start was always planned with room to grow in its ever-expanding universe of characters. On the flip side, the Power Rangers show itself beat Marvel to the punch on having a continuous, connected world. However, they didn't have the foresight to plant seeds early, only for things to be retroactively revisited after the fact, such as the Morphin Masters and Dino Fury. The 2017 film, with how alien the suits and Zord designs are, doesn't really feel like it could expand much further than that. They aren't designs that are necessarily sustainable in the long run. A benefit of the suits in the show were that they were so simple, you could do a lot with them. Everything in the film, design-wise, is overly designed, making it hard to imagine how much further they can go from where they settled. Even storytelling-wise, the film takes place in a small town. I've always personally seen Angel Grove as a stand-in for LA, and the Mighty Morphin team honestly does too much for their story to be regulated to such a small area. It would make more sense for teams like Mystic Force who have a forbidden forest of magical creatures to take place in a small town. With superhero films now dominating the film industry, it would be totally irresponsible to not take into account what the competition has been doing. Obviously, the biggest superhero film franchise to look out for is Marvel, so what have they been doing?
Well, let's ignore some of the recent stuff, but they've been doing things right on the road to get to this mess. The big thing is, they knew their scope and planned for it. A long-term roadmap of where they can end up. You have the individual films that all work separately as individual stories of their own. But what stories they did have left room to connect to a wider universe, eventually culminating in the Avengers. The 2017 Power Rangers film does a lot really well as an individual movie, but it doesn't leave room for expansion. Let me explain. Iron Man is a billionaire playboy philanthropist. He's rich beyond many of our wildest dreams and uses that money to fund his suits, but he's mainly independent. How he's written as a character or superhero does not have a direct effect on, let's say, the Hulk. He plays by his own rules. Power Rangers 2017 sets the ground rules for what is a Power Ranger, and what it does is that it doubles down on the alien concept. They have an almost organic nature to the designs. Like it or not, the original Mighty Morphin is often seen as the definitive image of Power Rangers in people's minds. So when you consider there's more teams that follow them with different theming, you're suddenly stuck. Will a team like Lightspeed, Time Force, or Operation Overdrive fit the alien look? How about the way the powers work? They heavily push that the act of morphing into their suits is strongly tied to their sense of teamwork. Don't get me wrong, it's a great plot device. I know a core tenet of the franchise is teamwork, but it's not necessarily something that can be sustained. Writing-wise, it only works as a plot point once. So you're telling me future teams either have to relearn this or just work from the get-go? How about teams where Rangers work solo or in incomplete groups? When they get to Lightspeed, I doubt a government organization is going to want to invest time and money into a technology that's reliant on whether two Rangers have a workplace grievance or not. And yes, they did tease Tommy, aka the Green Ranger, at the end of the film. But how would that have worked for him? Does he get an exception to the teamwork rule because he's evil? In order to start a Power Rangers franchise, the very first team must establish these set parameters, and the ones set in Power Rangers 2017 were just too narrow, in that it doesn't allow for much variation down the line. It's not open-ended enough. And that's not even getting into storylines. Obviously, the film is a retelling of Day of the Dumpster. The tease at the end is obviously green with evil, but from there, what's next? Another Mighty Morphin story? Or do they dip their toes early into other seasons so they can diversify much earlier? The strength of Marvel was that each franchise within the MCU was different. You had variety. But with how Power Rangers 2017 was structured, would we have been stuck with Mighty Morphin for years before we get to anything like Zeo? Here's my solution to this. Start it off with Mighty Morphin for the first 2 or so films, then start off a future season early, something to get a fresh set of characters who are still tied to the world, but just exist elsewhere. Why not do a Dave the Dumpster story, a Green with Evil story, and then jump to Operation Lightspeed? Can you tell what my favorite season is? Maybe have Lightspeed pop up as a response to the Ranger activities seen in the first 2 films, developing their own Ranger technology to battle a separate foe. This opens avenues for Ranger teams down the line by establishing that the powers aren't only alien, but they can be developed by humans. Also, it shows that there are other Ranger teams who are concurrently active. Also, multiple teams mean more toys. I got you, corporate executives. Hasbro, if you need a Kevin Feige type figure to lay out the groundwork for the Power Rangers franchise, my DMs are open. This section of the video heavily focused more on Power Rangers 2017, as the first 2 films don't really fit the bill as much. The first film just did its own thing with no expectations for a follow-up, and the second just stuck to the show's canon. Really, the 2017 film was the only one with sequel potential. But an element that all 3 films did differently that's worth talking about is the costumes. Just to bring in a third party to compare to, let's throw DC into the mix for this next topic. Something to take into consideration with Marvel and DC versus Power Rangers when it comes to adapting them into a film medium is the source material. Marvel and DC have to adapt comic books into their live-action films. Power Rangers is adapting a live-action TV show into a live-action medium. It's food for thought when designing suits. In my opinion, we should just use the in-show Ranger suits. It worked for Turbo and no one bats an eye about it. Don't fix what ain't broken, in my opinion. Some of you may be thinking, but wouldn't that look cheap? No, it wouldn't. Look at Marvel. Every Spider-Man costume so far has a spandex suit of some kind.
That is not.
I swear to, every Spider-Man costume so far has been a spandex suit of some kind, with some CG added. And that's mostly the same with Black Panther. You don't need to armor them up to make them look big budget. Or how about when the spandex does look bad? Look at Man of Steel. Look at the CW Flash and Supergirl show. The Superman suit has a weirdly gross, scaly pattern to it. Something that was replicated in Power Rangers 2017. But a big thing that sets Power Ranger designs apart from Marvel or DC is that they wear helmets. I feel when you can see part of an actor's exposed face as part of a cowl, sometimes it can look a bit uncanny. It's something that works better in comics or in animation, but not so much in live action. And that's a big strength of Power Rangers design. And yes, sometimes they do take off the helmets. But guess what? Power Rangers suits are also very form-fitting, meaning their silhouettes are very relatable. We understand what a general human physique looks like. The benefit of a simple design means we can skip the uncanniness of it. I think a good rule of thumb for how a good design can be is the use of bold colors and simple shapes. If it's something a 5-year-old can remember and draw, there's a good chance it has some good sticking power. Looking at the Mighty Morphin suits from the show, you can tell that they have some bold designs that are very memorable. Other than the colors, you get bold design choices like the diamonds across the torso and on the cuffs of the gloves and boots. Then there's the iconic dinosaur designs on the helmets, each helmet representing a different dinosaur for each member. Billy's helmet has 3 horns like a triceratops. Zach's helmet has tusks and a trunk. Trini's helmet has 2 fangs and ears. Power Rangers 2017 chose not to bring those designs out. Red is the only one with a unique helmet motif. The others just look like recolors of each other. You can't even tell what their dinosaurs are. The suits themselves also look very overly designed. Your eye has no idea where to go. The diamonds and the helmets brought your eyes over to a fundamental part of the design. The diamonds have been turned into this weird glowing thing. And then there's this odd, for lack of a better term, treasure trail leading down to the morphers. They also got rid of the belts, which they've done before in Power Rangers, but here it just makes them look very tall. Their torsos look awkwardly long. The shoulder designs also look very cluttered. When you see a silhouette, you can tell where the shoulders are, where the arm connects to the collarbone. But the too much going on design here makes a sort of sub-silhouette that kind of tricks your brain into thinking that the shoulders are in a little more. Anyway, enough about the designs. Let's get into tone. A common critique of DC is how dark and gritty some of their films are.
So dark? You sure you're not from the DC universe?
Though they've improved upon that, Marvel on the other hand takes a much lighter approach and uses a lot of humor and bright visuals. Now, it's not as simple as Power Rangers taking Marvel's approach. Look where they're at now. In fact, I think the tone really depends on what storyline is being told and who the Rangers are. In 2015, a dark and gritty Power Rangers fan film by Adi Shankar was released and stirred up discussion on how the franchise should be handled. I'm personally of the opinion that dark and edgy is an extreme cliche, but also there's such a thing as too bright or too silly. Marvel and the Power Rangers TV show now are both suffering from that in different ways. You can have an overall tone to your project, but don't make it so one note. We should use darkness to contrast brightness and vice versa, emphasis on contrast. There's a distinction between balancing dark and bright and contrasting. When it comes to writing, it's not about a quantifiable amount of certain tone, it's whatever serves the story. It would be easy to be formulaic and have one humorous scene to balance a sad scene, but that's not what should happen. Take Infinity War. It's a film with a very serious tone. Most of the film is kept serious, and by the end, it's somber. The Avengers lost, but there's still character moments and humor.
Trespassing in this city and on this planet.
It means get lost, Squidward.
They not only contrast the overall serious tone, it works to serve it. Humor is relatable. In this grand battle against Thanos and his forces, this kind of tonal shift is a reminder that these are humans. People who laugh, smile, live their lives, which makes it even more crushing when Thanos snaps his fingers and half the universe goes away. I think that's how Power Rangers should do it. Only keeping it dark or only keeping it light won't have that complex of an effect. We shouldn't drown the audience in that one tone, so let them come up for air and breathe. Making a film on the premise that it's Power Rangers but it's dark already negates the fact that it's Power Rangers as we know it. It also means that we're shying away from Power Rangers as it is. Having to add but it's dark is just a novelty. It's like that Winnie the Pooh horror film, Blood and Honey. It's a novelty because it's Winnie the Pooh, but it's dark. Is it any good? No. And that's not to say films like this can't be good, but you can only do it so much with a long-running franchise, which is what these films want to accomplish. What this essentially all boils down to is one question. Is this sustainable as a franchise? Obviously, fans will be biased and watch every Power Rangers project under the sun, but the real challenge is a general audience. There will be no further films if the audience does not care. For Power Rangers, you can drop a film and the general conscience will see it as a fun novelty. They made a modern film based on a 90s TV phenomenon, but unless they do something beyond that, it's not going to bring butts into seats for further installments. Oh, they made another Power Rangers movie? Didn't they just do that? That's what a general audience member is going to say. Instead, we need to get them excited for future installments. Hook them in with the first film. Give them a reason to stay for the following ones. And lastly, just make a good movie. Easier said than done. But if they hire passionate people who care and see the project as more than just a Power Rangers film, you'll go far. Combine that with competent writing experience and the ability to make a complete story with relatable characters and you have a recipe for success. It's always felt like there's this ball and chain tied around one ankle. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie had to ride the 90s Power Rangers craze so it didn't concern itself with doing anything earth-shattering. Turbo, to an extent, stuck too close to the show. It had too many ideas that it just didn't bother streamlining. It threw a lot of new things at the wall, like a Kid Ranger. And lastly, the Power Rangers 2017 movie had to be written for modern audiences, so all the characters, they had problems. They're deep. Even with the 30th anniversary special, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always coming out, you can see them trying to cater hard to the 90s nostalgia of the show. So much so, they're using the thick hero collars to emulate the look of the poor costuming. They literally unfixed the costumes to make it look bad. Wasn't this a video I made? We're also still waiting on Jonathan Entwistle's Power Rangers project. It's been quite some time since that was last announced, but we've seen nothing. We have no idea if this project is going to run into the same pitfalls as the first three films. Technically, we don't even know if the reboot project's going to be a TV show or a movie. We need a Power Rangers film that can stand on its own. It can't be a novel one-time thing. It's got to respect itself and the franchise it's adapting. Something appealing to a general audience and rewarding for the longtime fans. It has to be able to pave the way for the future. So which of the three Power Rangers films is the best? Don't necessarily pick your favorite, but think of why that particular film would be successful to a wider audience more than the other two. Share these thoughts below in the comments so we can get some discussion going. If you want to catch future videos, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Also, I have a Discord community that you should join. Links for that in the description.